Here's what nobody tells you about being a bodyguard. You become invisible until someone wants you dead. My name's Jake Morrison, I'm 45, and I've been protecting people who can afford me for the last 6 years. Started this work after I left the Rangers when the nightmares got too bad and I needed something that felt like purpose again. What I didn't expect was to end up working for the man who killed my brother. Yeah, you read that right. The wealthy bastard who pays my salary is the same piece of shit who ran down Danny 8 years ago on March 15th and drove away like nothing happened. I know because I've been living in his house for 3 months now, watching him sleep peacefully every night while I stay awake remembering the sound of that phone call. You know, the one, the call that destroys your life in 10 seconds. The really fucked up part. I think he knows exactly who I am. Marcus Webb hired Jake Morrison, Danny Morrison's older brother, and I'm starting to think that wasn't a coincidence. Every morning I make his coffee and wonder if today's the day I poison it. Every night I stand outside his bedroom door with my hand on my gun, thinking about how easy it would be. But I'm too scared to quit because leaving means losing the only chance I'll ever have to prove what he did to Danny. So here I am, protecting the man I want to kill, and I'm terrified of what that makes me. What scares me most is that I'm starting to like the power I have over him. The job started normal enough, which should have been my first red flag. Marcus Webb, 52, real estate mogul with more money than God and twice as many enemies. His regular bodyguard had taken a bullet meant for someone else, so Webb's people called my agency specifically asking for someone with military experience. 3 months, they said. Just until the heat died down from some business deal gone bad. The pay was stupid good, 20 grand a month plus expenses, enough to finally pay off Danny's medical bills that I'd been carrying for 8 years. Webb seemed decent at first, polite, treated his staff well, never raised his voice. Professional distance, clean background checks on everyone, standard rich guy paranoia about kidnappers and disgruntled business partners. I set up my routines like I always do: morning security sweep at 6 a.m., escort to meetings, evening perimeter checks before bed. Webb worked late most nights, entertained clients in his home office, lived alone in a mansion that could house 50 people comfortably. The place was quiet, predictable, boring as hell, exactly how I liked my jobs. Clean and simple. I even started sleeping better than I had in months, which was saying something. Should have known something was wrong when a job felt too easy, too comfortable. Should have trusted my gut when Webb would stare at me sometimes during those first weeks, like he was waiting for something, studying my reactions. But the money was good, and God knows I needed normal in my life after everything that had happened. Turns out normal was just another word for trap, and I'd walked right into it. It was a Tuesday in September when everything started falling apart, though I didn't know it yet. Webb had a late meeting with some city planning officials, routine bullshit about zoning permits for his latest development project. I was doing my usual end-of-day scan of his office, checking windows, testing locks, making sure everything was secure for the night. That's when I accidentally knocked over a stack of files on his desk while adjusting the blinds. Papers scattered everywhere: contracts, permits, legal documents, insurance forms. Standard rich guy paperwork. As I gathered them up, trying to put everything back exactly where it belonged, one document caught my eye and my heart stopped. Insurance claim from 8 years ago. Auto damage claim. Vehicle repair estimate. Same date. Same fucking date Danny died. March 15th, 2017. My hands started shaking as I read the details. Minor front-end damage to 2016 BMW X5. License plate BN7-4792. Estimated repair cost $3,847. I memorized that plate number years ago, burned it into my brain from the police report I wasn't supposed to have. The one I got from a cop who felt sorry for me. The witness who saw the car speed away that night had written it down. Webb's car. Webb's fucking car. I sat there on his expensive Persian carpet, surrounded by his papers, and the world tilted sideways. I was working for my brother's killer. The insurance claim was processed 3 days after Danny's funeral, while I was still picking out headstones and crying in grocery store parking lots. Webb got his bumper fixed while I was falling apart. I put the papers back exactly where they fell, but something had broken inside me that couldn't be fixed. The careful professional distance I'd maintained started cracking like ice in spring. I spent the next week trying to convince myself I was wrong, that I was seeing connections that weren't there because grief makes you fucking crazy and I'd been carrying Danny's death for 8 years. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe there were other BMW X5s with similar damage that night. Maybe my memory of the license plate was wrong, distorted by trauma and time and wishful thinking. But every time I looked at the insurance paperwork which I'd photographed with my phone in a moment of paranoid clarity, the dates lined up perfectly, cruelly, undeniably. Danny died at 11:47 p.m. on March 15th. Webb filed his insurance claim on March 18th, claiming the damage happened sometime during the evening of March 15th. The police report I'd memorized said, hit-and-run incident, suspect vehicle fled scene at high speed. The insurance adjuster's notes were clinical, detached. Vehicle damage consistent with pedestrian impact, minor front-end deformation, headlight assembly cracked. I tried calling my old contact at the police department, Detective Morrison, no relation, just one of life's cruel ironies. He'd retired 2 years ago, moved to Florida to fish and forget about all the cases he couldn't solve. His replacement, Detective Chin, had never heard of Danny's case and seemed annoyed when I brought it up. Cold case, she said with the practiced indifference of someone who'd heard this story 1,000 times. Unless you have new evidence, there's nothing we can do. What was I supposed to say? That I was illegally photographing my employer's private documents? That I was working for someone I suspected of vehicular manslaughter? That would end my access to Webb, destroy any chance of getting real proof. Webb started asking me personal questions during those weeks, casual inquiries that felt like surgical probes. About my family, my background, whether I had siblings, what happened to them. Each question felt like a knife turning in an old wound. The way he smiled when I mentioned Danny's name, like he was tasting something sweet. Like he already knew every detail and was just waiting to see how long it would take me to figure out the game. The evidence kept piling up like a fucking avalanche, and I couldn't stop digging even though every new piece made me feel sicker. Webb's calendar from that week 8 years ago, I found it in his archived files while doing a routine security assessment of his home office systems. March 15, 2017. Dinner at Romano's, 9:30 p.m. Romano's was the Italian place 6 blocks from where Danny was walking home from his graveyard shift at the hospital, the same route he'd taken every night for 2 years. Security footage I, accidentally, discovered while reviewing current camera systems showed Webb's BMW returning to the garage at 12:23 a.m. on March 16, exactly 36 minutes after Danny was declared dead at the scene. But Romano's closed at midnight back then. I called and confirmed it with the manager who'd worked there for 15 years. So where was Webb for those extra 23 minutes? Webb's personal assistant Elena, who'd been with him for 12 years and knew every dirty secret he had, started avoiding eye contact with me completely. She'd been friendly before, always offering coffee and small talk. Now she'd practically sprint in the opposite direction when she saw me coming. One afternoon I caught her shredding old phone records in Webb's office, feeding them through an industrial-grade paper shredder like she was destroying evidence of war crimes. When I asked what she was destroying, she just said, "Spring cleaning," in a voice that shook like autumn leaves, refusing to look at me. But I saw the dates on those papers before they disappeared forever, March 2017. The exact week Danny died. Later, I checked Webb's archived phone logs, the ones Elena hadn't gotten to yet. 7 calls to his lawyer that week, 3 to his insurance company, and 1 47-minute call to a private investigator named Marcus Torino. Why would someone need a PI after a simple fender bender? Unless they were covering up something much bigger than vehicle damage. The worst part was how Webb watched me figuring it out, like I was his personal entertainment system. He'd catch me staring at his car in the garage, and that cold, satisfied smile would spread across his face like oil on water. Like he was proud of how clever he'd been 8 years ago. Like watching me put the pieces together was better than any show money could buy. The moment everything changed was a Thursday night in October. Webb was hosting a dinner party for some city council members, and I was doing perimeter checks when I heard voices from his study. The door was cracked open, and I could see Webb pouring drinks for 2 men I didn't recognize. "You remember the Morrison problem from a few years back?" Webb said, and my blood turned to ice. "The kid who was going to testify about the Riverside project?" One of the men laughed. "Hell of a thing, getting taken out by a drunk driver like that." Webb raised his glass. "Sometimes problems solve themselves. Though I have to admit, hiring his brother has been more entertaining than I expected." The room started spinning. Danny wasn't just a random victim. He'd been targeted. He was going to testify about something, some project Webb was involved in. And Webb had hired me knowing exactly who I was. This wasn't coincidence or cruel irony. This was psychological torture. Webb knew I'd figure it out eventually. He was counting on it. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might explode. 8 years of grief, 8 years of thinking Danny died because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But he died because he was trying to do the right thing. And now I was trapped in the house of his killer, protecting the man who murdered my brother for money. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. Every morning I had to look Webb in the eye and pretend I didn't know he was a murderer. Every night I lay awake planning ways to kill him, then hating myself for becoming the kind of person who plans murder. I tried calling in sick, but Webb insisted I stay close. "You look pale, Jake," he'd say with that fucking smile. "Maybe you should see a doctor. Stress can be a killer." The emphasis on killer wasn't subtle. He was enjoying this. I reached out to Tommy, another guard from my agency, thinking maybe I could trust someone. Wrong move. Tommy called Webb directly, told him I was acting strange, asking questions about past clients. Webb pulled me into his office the next day. "Tommy's concerned about your mental state," he said. "Maybe this job is too much pressure. Though I'd hate to lose you. You've become quite irreplaceable." That's when I realized how completely fucked I was. Webb owned my agency. He'd probably handpicked me for this assignment. Anyone I trusted in the business would report back to him. My own colleagues had become his eyes and ears. Elena started leaving subtle threats on my desk, newspaper clippings about accidents that happened to people who betrayed their employers. I was alone, living in enemy territory, with nowhere to run. The clarity came during a routine escort to Webb's lawyer's office. We were stopped at a red light when a homeless guy approached my window, tapping on the glass. Something about him seemed familiar, so I rolled it down. "You're Morrison's brother," he whispered urgently. "Danny's brother. Your boy was trying to help us. The Riverside Project was going to bulldoze our camp, displace 300 people. Danny was going to testify for us." Before I could respond, the light changed and Webb was telling me to drive. But in that moment, everything clicked. Danny wasn't just some hospital worker who happened to know about corruption. He was actively fighting it. He was going to court to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. And Webb killed him for it. Not in a moment of panic or drunken stupidity, but as a calculated business decision. I realized I'd been thinking about this all wrong. This wasn't about revenge or justice or making Webb pay. This was about finishing what Danny started. That homeless man was still out there, still fighting Webb's development projects. There were others who remembered Danny, who needed someone to stand up for them. Webb thought he was torturing me by hiring Danny's brother. But he'd actually put the one person who could destroy him right inside his house. I made my choice on a Sunday when Webb was at his country club. I had 4 hours alone in the house, maybe 5 if he played 18 holes. I'd been mapping his security system for months, knew every camera angle, every blind spot. His home office had a safe behind a painting, typical rich guy move. I'd watched him open it enough times to memorize the combination, Danny's death date. Sick fuck probably thought it was funny. Inside the safe, I found everything. Not just the insurance documents, but photos from that night. Webb had hired someone to clean up the scene, make sure there were no witnesses left to talk. The private investigator's report detailed how they'd identified Danny, learned about his planned testimony, decided he was too much of a threat. There were payments to city officials, bribes to silence the homeless community, even medical records showing Danny was still alive when Webb's car hit him. He could have been saved if someone had called for help instead of driving away. I photographed everything with my phone, then made copies of the most damning evidence. But I didn't just take pictures. I took the originals too. If Webb noticed they were missing, he'd know it was me, but I was past caring about my cover. While I worked, I kept thinking about that homeless man who'd approached my car. He'd said others were still fighting Webb's development projects. Danny hadn't been fighting alone, and neither was I. I found contact information for the advocacy group Danny had been helping, lawyers who'd been building cases against Webb's projects. These people needed what I'd found. They needed proof that Webb wasn't just a corrupt businessman, he was a murderer who'd killed to protect his investments. Before I left Webb's office, I made one more decision. I planted a listening device behind his desk, something I'd learned in the Rangers. If Webb was planning to hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt Danny, I'd know about it. Danny deserved better than hiding behind Webb's own security system while his killer slept peacefully upstairs. He deserved justice, and I was going to make sure he got it. Webb knew the documents were missing before I even got back from my supposed coffee run. Elena was waiting by my car when I returned, her face pale as death. "He wants to see you in his office," she said, then grabbed my arm. "Jake, whatever you're planning, don't. He's not the kind of man who forgives." But it was too late for warnings. I walked into that office knowing it might be the last thing I ever did. Webb was sitting behind his desk, calm as always, but his eyes were different. Predatory. "Lose something today, Jake?" he asked. I didn't answer. "You know, I've been wondering when you'd make your move. Part of me is disappointed it took this long." He pulled out a tablet, showed me footage of myself in his office, opening his safe. "Impressive work. Your brother would be proud." The way he said Danny's name made my skin crawl. "Here's what's going to happen," Webb continued. "You're going to give me back what you took, and we're going to continue our arrangement. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone you've ever cared about has the same kind of accident Danny had." He had photos of my ex-wife, my nephew, even my old army buddies. This man had been planning for this moment since the day he hired me. I realized he'd been watching me as closely as I'd been watching him. Every phone call I'd made, every contact I'd tried to reach, he knew about all of it. "The advocacy group you contacted?" Webb smiled. "They received a very generous donation to focus their efforts elsewhere. The lawyers building cases against my projects? They've found more profitable clients." The listening device I'd planted behind his desk was sitting on his desktop, crushed flat. Webb had known about it the whole time. "You see, Jake, the beautiful thing about hiring someone's grieving brother is that grief makes people predictable. I knew exactly what you'd do, how you'd react, who you'd turn to. I've been 3 steps ahead of you since the moment you walked into my house." I was trapped in a nightmare that had no exit, no clean ending, no justice. Just endless psychological warfare with a man who'd turned my brother's murder into a game. That was 6 months ago. I'm still here, still protecting the man who murdered my brother, still sleeping 3 feet away from Danny's killer every night. But things have changed in ways Webb doesn't understand. Those documents I stole? I didn't just copy them for myself. Before Webb confronted me that day, I'd already made my real move. See, Webb thinks like a businessman. He assumes everyone can be bought, that every problem has a price. But he forgot I'm a soldier first. Soldiers don't negotiate with the enemy. They adapt, improvise, and find another way to complete the mission. While Webb was busy buying off the advocacy group and the local lawyers, I was reaching out to people he couldn't touch. Federal investigators who specialize in organized crime. FBI agents who've been building RICO cases against corrupt developers for years. Military contacts who know how to move sensitive information through channels Webb doesn't even know exist. The real evidence isn't sitting in some activist's filing cabinet where Webb can make it disappear with a check. It's buried deep in federal databases, cross-referenced with other cases, part of a pattern that's bigger than just one dead whistleblower. Webb still smiles that cold smile when he looks at me, still thinks this is his game. He doesn't know that 3 different federal task forces are building cases against him, that his own city council allies have been wearing wires for months, that the Riverside Project is the tip of an iceberg that goes back decades. Every morning when I do my security sweep, every night when I check the locks, I'm not just protecting Webb anymore. I'm gathering intelligence on a dead man walking. Webb hired me to torture me, but what he really did was put Danny's brother right where he needed to be to watch his killer's empire crumble from the inside. The beautiful thing about being a bodyguard is that you become invisible until someone wants you dead. And Webb still doesn't know that I'm already dead inside, which makes me the most dangerous kind of ghost he could have hired. I still check the back seat, but now I'm not looking for threats. I'm counting down the days until the handcuffs click.